More draft talk is coming on this episode, including some thoughts from Sebastian High from Locked On NHL Prospects. All of this on this episode of Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for well over a decade, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So we've got some more prospects talk and more draft talk that we're going to get to. But before going into that, just want to bring up the fact that it is the summer right now, so the news cycle is kind of slow. But we do have some news that we are going to get to. Still hoping to get some guests on later this week. We actually have thoughts from the host of Locked On NHL Prospects, so that will be today and tomorrow. So this will be kind of a two-part episode, so that's what is coming up as far as today is concerned. All right. So obviously the draft happened a couple weeks ago, and both Sebastian and Hadi Kalakesh made the trip out to Vegas for the NHL Draft. And Sebastian High had a lot of thoughts about the Ducks and actually praised the Ducks for this particular draft. So we're just going to get right into it. Here is the first part of this video and my thoughts afterwards from Sebastian High from Locked On NHL Prospects, coming at you right now.
So let's kick things off for the episode here by diving into that 2024 NHL draft class. And Anaheim, as per usual, decided to make things a bit chaotic and dramatic on draft day. The Anaheim Ducks are never afraid of picking the player that they want in the draft slot where they are selecting, whether or not it's a player who's actually projected to go at that pick prior to the draft among public rankings or even in the private sphere. Last year they went out and ahead and picked Leo Carlsson at second overall ahead of the projected second overall pick, Adam Fantilli. A couple years ago, they also went out and picked Mason McTavish, quite a few slots above where he was projected to go. And that pick has been aging fantastically well. He's been a stalwart, the top six center, and continues to be looking to take strides in his development this upcoming season. And this year, at third overall, the Anaheim Ducks went out and picked Beckett Sennecke, the 6'3" power forward right winger, who has grown about 6 inches in the last year and a half, and has had to get used to his bigger frame and get accustomed to playing at that size. Has been a really big late riser in this draft class. He's a fantastic elite level puck handler, and his combination of quite mature habits off puck. He's very intelligent in the offensive zone. He applies pressure and physicality. He's really making use of his frame in that aspect specifically. He reads play well defensively, and with the puck on his stick, he can create in ways that very few NHLers can, leveraging his handling and reaction speed to just dissect defensive structures. He can get through like 4 defenders and get through alone on goal at the end of it. It's happened quite regularly at the OHL level. And while he still needs to learn how to build play a bit more incrementally and be a bit more planned in most of his offensive rushes rather than a pure improviser, the foundation of skill and habits and tools that this player has are absolutely fantastic. And taking the swing at third overall is bullish, but it's certainly Anaheim continuing their trend of simply believing in the players that they like the most, that they think are going to be high-end NHLers. And Beckett Sennecke will be playing fantastic hockey alongside some defensively capable centermen as well in Leo Carlsson or Mason McTavish. And those are also players that are going to be able to feed him pucks, allow him to practice his goal scoring ability a little bit, but also create time and space for him to leverage that handling skill. I'm very excited to see what Beckett Sennecke is able to do at the NHL level, but First, he's still going to need a couple seasons of development, starting off in the OHL now, going back to the Oshawa Generals, and just picking up where he left off as a dominant playoff performer, dragging his team to the OHL finals, which he unfortunately missed to injury. At 23rd overall, the Ducks also selected one of the best picks of the entire draft, in my opinion, snatching Stian Solberg, trading up with the Toronto Maple Leafs to snag that 23rd pick. And Solberg is a fantastic fit. Not only is this a player that I believe deserved to have gone a lot higher than he did on draft day, he ended up at 14th on my final rankings because of his combination of high-end mobility, like violent physicality, strong defensive impact, and a lot of runway in developing his on-puck game as well. He was playing like 30 minutes a night at the pro level in the Norwegian Pro League this past year, and he's transferring over to Sweden, and he'll be playing SHL minutes this upcoming year, which is going to be very exciting to see what he does and how he develops in a bit more of a role that reflects his capabilities, where he isn't being triple shifted every single night. And Färjestad is a very strong development system as well. So I'm curious to see how that 6'2", 205-pound left-shot defenseman is able to develop his game. But he's also a great fit for Anaheim's defensive core. There's already a lot of high-end skill on the blue line, whether it be Pavel Mintyukov or Olin Zellweger, and adding in Solberg as a steady two-way piece who can punish players with his physicality. It can bring a really reliable defensive impact and has so much runway to develop into a high-end top four, potentially top pairing piece at the end of the day. This is a fantastic selection. No notes whatsoever.
Thanks to Sebastian for that little bit. He will have more thoughts in a second, but before we head into break, I do want to give a couple of thoughts on this. So first off, I think the Ducks have reached quite a bit, but it's worked out. I mean, to kind of piggyback of what Sebastian has said, Ducks fans are not looking back going, man, I wish we'd gotten this guy. Man, I wish we'd gotten this guy. They're not saying that right now. There might be one or two out of 1,000 Ducks fans right now that are saying, oh man, I wish we had gotten Adam Fantilli instead of Leo Carlsson. But for the most part, that pick is looking like a slam dunk. The Mason McTavish pick, that one I know got to a lot of fans a couple years ago. I remember that. I was one of them that I was like, I'm happy about it, but I still think they left little on the table. No, I don't think that anymore. I think Mason McTavish is looking like a perfect fit for a Ducks team that is rebuilding and someone that is still getting better. McTavish has not reached his final form yet. He is going to get better. He's going to continue to put pucks in the net. Given both those guys having full healthy seasons, the Ducks could give some teams a lot of trouble in the near future. So I'm really excited about that. I do have some thoughts about Beckett Sennecke, some more thoughts. And also I have some thoughts on what he can bring to the Ducks and how he can help this team out. But we are up against it, so we're going to head into the first intermission right now. Stay locked in. And now a brief word from FanDuel. That is right. It is the dog days of summer, and I love sports, but you know, the playoffs have ended for hockey and basketball, and there is not as many sports, especially on a day like today. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And please, folks, gamble responsibly. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you are locked in with Jason Hernandez. So I have quite a few thoughts about Beckett Sennecke. So I am going to piggyback a little bit on this is basically me responding to what Sebastian said about the draft and the draft picks, particularly the first two. Sennecke is a terrific puck handler. This was highlighted in the video that we just saw. is that he can create his own plays. We saw this on the rookie camp not long ago at Gray Park. We know that he's good at creating his own space. We know that he can get into the zone with relative ease. And I thought to myself, well, how is he going to fit into this Ducks roster? What's going to happen there? Well, first off, Sennecke's very likely going to play juniors for one more season. I mean, this was what I heard at the draft right away. And this was what Sebastian had also heard. Like, we both heard the same thing at the draft, was that he was likely going to play in juniors for, he says 2 years. It's looking like it's going to be 1 or 2 years, but I would say closer to 1 year, if that. And then he would make his way onto the National Hockey League. So I give him 1 more year. And he could refine his game even more than it already is. We saw this with Mason McTavish. McTavish got drafted, spent another season in juniors, dominated in juniors, made it all the way to the Memorial Cup final. So we know that this is a good barometer of what the Ducks have done in the past. They've let their draft picks kind of marinate just a little bit more, and it's worked to perfection. But how can he help the Ducks in the future? Well, I took a look at some of the advanced stats. I know that the Ducks' zone entries are pretty piss poor. And this was pointed out that Sennecke gets into the zone pretty effectively. He does. But how can he improve the Ducks on that? Well, you know what? I'm going to show you right now. In fact, let me just, go over here and bang, there it is. So, how he can help out the Ducks. Look at this. Look how crappy this is. Zone time. The Ducks' zone time is about as bad as any team out there. Offensive zone time, only 38.8%. Ugh. Well below league average. Percentiles below 50%. Neutral zone time, 18.2. Defensive zone time, 43.0. That offensive zone time is pretty bad, folks. In fact, there's only a couple teams that are worse. You can probably guess. Those teams are the San Jose Sharks and the Chicago Blackhawks. Those are the only 2 teams that are worse than the Ducks. So to say they're below 50th percentile, that's being nice. And this is from the NHL Edge website too. That's being nice. And then Solberg. Solberg, I just love that pick. The more I think about it, the more I love that pick. Yes, he's the most violent pick out there. But his defensive prowess, I think, is going to get, overlooked. Like, it got overlooked by a few teams. The fact that Sebastian had him ranked in the teens in his draft, that shows how much his stock rose. But it also showed how much the Ducks value defense. Now, do I see him as a top 4 defenseman? Yes, I really do. Do I see him as a top pairing defenseman? Ooh, boy. That's tough to say. I think if Solberg can really just harness that energy, maybe not dial it back, but if he could really harness that energy and just refine little pieces of his game, such as getting a much better active stick than he already has, learning to read defenses perfectly. He can already read them well. But if he can even get better at that, then he's going to be a very dangerous defenseman, and his ceiling could be top pairing defenseman. So he also has some work to do. I'm encouraged by the fact that he's going to play in the SHL this coming season. A lot of players do much better with that extra year in Scandinavia. So I could see him being even better than he already is. So I like what Sebastian said here. All right, we're just going to head right into the second intermission right now. When we come back, Sebastian is going to have some more thoughts on the rest of the draft, and I'll talk about that on the other side. And now, a brief word from Indeed. And Indeed, you do need Indeed, because we're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to do that isn't to search, but you can match with Indeed, because they have instant match, and Indeed is your instant matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors. And according to Indeed data, a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. And it doesn't just help you hire faster. No, not just that. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Join more than the $3.5 million or 3.5 million businesses. Some of them are worth $3.5 million, but join the more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Yeah. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you are locked in with Jason J.D. Hernandez on episode number 909. Yeah, that's right, down in the 909. All right, just got to give a shout out to my Inland Empire peeps. Let's get into the rest of the draft picks, and with more thoughts on this NHL draft is Sebastian High from Locked On NHL Prospects. Take it away.
In the second round, Anaheim went out and selected Lucas Pettersson at 35th overall, which is a very interesting pick. Pettersson is a really pacey, speedy player. He loves to play with the puck on his stick at his highest speeds. He can create as well at those high speeds, tearing through the J20 league this past season. And while I do still have some questions about his impact when he's not going at his top speeds and he's slowing the pace down, I think his handling and playmaking ability aren't quite as strong when he's not going at top speed. There's still a really interesting basis here because the handling ability is strong. The speed is fantastic. The two-way impact's very good as well. The defensive ability is a clear area of strength. And he scored 27 goals and 57 points in 44 J20 games last season with Modo. And I'm curious to see what a potential SHL season is going to look like this year. The combination of competitiveness and mobility is really interesting. And he can play both at center or on the wing. So he'll be an interesting one to track in terms of development. I think that if he really hits his upside, you're looking at a second line piece, but more than likely a third line contributor. In the third round, they also went out and selected three different players. They had three picks in that range, starting off with a big physical QMJHL forward in Maxime Massé, 6'3", 190 pounds, who was projected to go into in the first round at the beginning of this draft cycle, but it fell a little bit over the course of the season, despite putting up 36 goals and 75 points through 67 games for the Chicoutimi Saguenayens in the QMJHL. This is a guy who plays with grit and physicality. He's a strong forechecker. There are flashes of really good playmaking ability in his game. He has a pretty good release as well. I don't really see the top six potential in this player, but in terms of a bottom six checker with a really heavy shot, power forward ability, and potential as a sniper if he really hits, I think Massé is a really, really good value selection in the third round. They also went out and picked Ethan Procession from the North Bay Battalion in the OHL, a 6'2", 190-pound right shot centerman who scored 36 points through 62 games this season. So the production hasn't been the most fantastic thing in the world, but he's a really physical player who uses his frame to box out opponents, and he's able to create offense out of physical situations. He's always trying to disrupt play. He's very engaged off puck, and he's the type of player that you want to take a swing on with that combination of physicality, intensity, and being very young for the draft class, only turning 18 on July 11th. So very young for the class, interesting toolkit. He'll be just developing in the background with the North Bay Battalion in the coming years. But the final pick in the third round for Anaheim was Terrence Smith, a really fun left shot defenseman, average sized, but a really dynamic puck handler with flashes of high-end offensive potential, who was also able to really refine his two-way impact over the course of the season, keeping a really tight gap in transition when defending the rush, and getting involved on cycle defense as well, and being relatively consistently engaged. There are definitely some games where he looked a bit passive, but as a whole, I think he's a fantastic player that I would have picked a bit earlier than this where he fell. So strong value again for Anaheim, which seems to be par for the course for the drafting strategy in the mid to late rounds. And I think overall is a really good third round haul for the Ducks. Last but not least, we're going to wrap things up here with the 4th, 6th, and 7th round picks. Alexandre Blais, an undersized forward at the Q, was the 100th overall selection on draft day. He's 5'10", 154, but really skilled and nifty. He's a player who thinks just as fast as his feet move, which is a really nice combination. And his handling ability is also around that same level. So really pacey puck handler with a lot of speed and really good reading of play, who scored 84 points in 68 QMJHL games last season. Pretty old for the draft class, a November 15th birthday, but an interesting swing on a highly offensively gifted QMJHLer in the mid rounds. They also picked Austin Brnevic, a big right winger from who's committed to St. Cloud University in the NCAA. He's a D+1. And he's 6'4", 201 pounds, really good puck handler, pretty smart player as well with the puck on his stick. And he scored 71 points, including 40 goals in 61 games in the USHL for the Madison Capitals last season, which is an interesting type of profile to take a swing on. And last but not least, we have Darius Uljanskas, a Latvian left shot defenseman who is also young for the draft class, an August 25th birthday. He's a pretty mobile puck moving defenseman who played in the J20 League in Sweden last season, logging 11 goals and 29 points through 45 games. Also played at the World Juniors and the U18 World Championships for Team Latvia. And he's an interesting type of profile, like the mobility, the youth, the offensive involvement that really improved as the season went on. He has a 6'2", 194-pound frame as well. Pretty interesting profile of player to add in the 7th round. But I think as a whole, this draft class is quite strong, even if it was very bullish with that first third overall selection. I would still give it an A- grade as a whole. I know some Ducks fans might be a little bit confused about them passing on guys like Demidov and Lindstrom, but Beckett Sennecke has fantastic potential, and yes, he's a bit further away than those previous players in terms of his development, but the flashes of elite level offensive skill that he showed, especially in the playoffs in the OHL, were truly superb. And I think an overall A- grade is quite fitting for this draft class. They got a lot of quality for each draft slot as well. And I think it's a strong addition to the prospect pool.
Thanks once again to Sebastian for that. He had a lot of good insight here. I like pretty much all the picks the Ducks made in this draft. For him to give an A- grade, that's pretty telling for the Ducks and their scouts. The way they have scouted and scoured through all these picks. Got to give all the credit in the world to the Ducks staff. They've typically done a great job with the drafts recently, especially the last maybe 4 or 5 years. I would say they've hit more home runs than misses in these drafts. And it is going to show. It is going to show very soon. Maybe a little bit next season, but for sure in a couple of years, you're going to see these young kids blossom. And just watch out, rest of the NHL. The baby Ducks are coming. And they're going to be coming fast. And as far as San Diego, look, they're starting to bolster their lineup. The San Diego Gulls, they're also going to get better. The Gulls, I think, are going to be a playoff team next season because some of those young guys, they have to go somewhere. They've begun to age out from juniors, and now you're going to see a very stacked Gulls lineup. Yes, there's a ton of rookies and a ton of development players. I talked about that on the previous podcast, but they're going to be good too. So give it time, but I say once again, have patience, Ducks fans. The future is looking bright. The future is looking good. On the next podcast, Sebastian is going to have much more to talk about, including the overall prospect pool for the Anaheim Ducks, which is looking phenomenal. It is looking just absolutely terrific. So he's going to talk about that, give overall grades on the prospect pool, and he will have some final thoughts on the Ducks prospects overall. So stay tuned for that. Not tomorrow, but later tonight. All right. That's going to wrap it up for this podcast. Once again, thank you all for listening. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, ad-free on Amazon. Yeah, ad-free on Amazon. Don't forget that. If you have Amazon Prime, we are ad-free. And we're also on Sirius XM, so check us out there if you have the Sirius XM app. Also, you could email me your questions at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. Once again, lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. You could follow me on Twitter X for now at StimpyJD. And the show's Twitter is at LO_Ducks. And once again, thank you all so much for your continued support. It is so greatly appreciated. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason Hernandez saying have a great rest of the afternoon. Stay cool out there, folks. Please remember to be safe out there, be kind to one another, and Ducks fly together.